My name is Vincent Marshall Caldwell, and I'm 71 years old. What I'm about to share happened 5 years ago, during what I believed would be the final act of a life defined by brilliance, arrogance, and ultimately catastrophic failure. This is a story about destroying lives through certainty and learning humility through ruin, about discovering that the expertise that made you successful can become the weapon that destroys everything you've built. My story begins on a freezing February morning 5 years ago. I was standing on the observation deck of the Riverside Bridge, looking down at the dark water 180 feet below, wondering if this would be the day I finally found the courage to jump. The wind cut through my coat like knives, but I barely felt it. I had been numb for so long that physical cold meant nothing compared to the ice that had formed around my heart over the past 19 years. 19 years earlier, I had been a different person entirely. I was Dr. Vincent Caldwell, one of the most respected structural engineers in the country. I had designed bridges, high-rises, and civic buildings across 3 continents. My work had won awards. My consulting firm employed 87 people. I was featured in architectural magazines, invited to speak at international conferences, and considered a titan in my field. I had a wife of 32 years, Margaret, a woman of infinite patience, who had supported my career even when it meant relocating 7 times in the first decade of our marriage. I had 2 adult sons, both successful professionals who looked up to their father with pride. I had a circle of colleagues who respected me, a reputation that opened doors, and the comfortable arrogance that comes from decades of being right. But on November 9th, I destroyed all of that in a series of decisions driven by ego, cost-cutting, and a fundamental belief that I knew better than everyone else. The Westfield Crossing was meant to be my masterpiece, a pedestrian bridge spanning the Clearwater River, connecting 2 halves of a growing city. The design was elegant, innovative, and significantly more affordable than the competing proposals. That affordability was key to why my firm won the contract. I had proposed using a modified cable stay design with a central tower and radiating cables supporting a lightweight deck. It was beautiful on paper, a soaring white structure that would become an iconic landmark. But to make the numbers work, I had made certain choices about materials, cable specifications, and support structures that pushed the boundaries of standard engineering practice. My senior engineer, Patricia Huang, had expressed concerns during the design phase. "Vincent, these cable specifications are below what I'd recommend for this span length and expected load capacity," she told me in a meeting 6 months before construction began. "We should increase the diameter and change the alloy composition." "Patricia," I said with the patronizing tone I had perfected over decades, "I've been designing bridges for 35 years. The calculations are sound. We're not over-engineering this project just to inflate costs. The city has a budget, and we're going to deliver within that budget." She tried again. "I understand the budget constraints, but safety margins exist for reasons. We're assuming ideal conditions and perfect maintenance. Real-world bridges face corrosion, unexpected loads, temperature fluctuations, which I've accounted for," I interrupted. "I appreciate your diligence, but I need you to trust my experience here. Looking back, I can see exactly what I was doing. I was treating her legitimate engineering concerns as an affront to my authority. I was prioritizing my ego and my firm's profit margin over safety margins that existed for good reasons." Patricia wasn't the only one who raised concerns. The city's independent safety inspector, James Rothman, had questioned several aspects of the design. The construction company's foreman had noted during installation that the cables seemed lighter than usual. Even my own associate engineer, a brilliant young man named Kevin Park, had quietly mentioned that he'd run the calculations 3 times and kept getting results that suggested we needed thicker cables. Each time, I dismissed the concerns. I was Dr. Vincent Caldwell. I had designed structures on 4 continents. I knew what I was doing. The bridge opened in May with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by the mayor, city council members, and local media. I stood there beaming, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. "This bridge will serve the community for generations," I said in my speech. "It represents the perfect balance of beauty, functionality, and fiscal responsibility." For 6 months, the Westfield Crossing functioned exactly as designed. Thousands of people crossed it daily, commuters walking to work, parents pushing strollers, joggers, cyclists, students going to and from the university on the east side of the river. It became exactly what we'd hoped, a beloved community landmark. Then came November 9th. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The bridge was crowded with weekend pedestrians, families, college students, elderly couples. A farmer's market was being held on the east side, so foot traffic was heavier than usual, though still well within the design specifications. At 2:47 p.m., one of the primary support cables snapped. Later analysis would show that the cable had been developing microfractures for months due to a combination of factors. The lighter gauge cable specification I'd insisted on, an alloy composition that proved more susceptible to environmental corrosion than expected, and stress loads that, while within design parameters, left no margin for the real-world degradation that Patricia had warned about. When the first cable snapped, it created a cascading failure. The load redistributed to adjacent cables, which were already operating near their limits. 3 more cables failed within seconds. The deck twisted, buckled, and collapsed. 43 people were on the bridge when it fell. The collapse took 7 seconds. 7 seconds for a structure I had designed to tear itself apart and plunge into the river below. 17 people died. 14 died on impact. 3 more died in the days following from their injuries. 26 others were injured, many severely. 8 were left with permanent disabilities. Among the dead were a family of 4 who had been visiting from Ohio. A 67-year-old retired teacher who volunteered at the local library, a 22-year-old nursing student, a young couple who had gotten engaged on that bridge 3 months earlier, and a man who had survived cancer twice, only to die in the freezing water of the Clearwater River. I was at home when it happened, watching a football game. Margaret was reading in her chair. The phone rang. It was Patricia. "Vincent, the bridge collapsed." Her voice was shaking. "But Westfield Crossing just fell into the river. There are people in the water. Emergency services are responding. They're saying there are casualties." I don't remember the next few hours clearly. Images exist as fractured pieces. Turning on the television and seeing aerial footage of the twisted wreckage in the river. Seeing the rescue boats. Hearing the news anchor saying at least 12 confirmed dead. Margaret's hand gripping mine, her face pale with horror. What I remember most clearly is the moment when my phone rang again and I saw Kevin Part's name on the screen. I knew what he was going to say before I answered. "Dr. Caldwell," Kevin said, his voice breaking. "The preliminary reports are suggesting cable failure. They're going to investigate the specifications." And I knew. In that moment, standing in my living room with the television showing body bags being carried up from the riverbank, I knew exactly what had happened. I knew that my decisions, my arrogance, my refusal to listen to legitimate safety concerns had killed those people. The investigation took 8 months. 8 months of forensic engineering analysis, metallurgical testing, computer modeling, witness interviews, and document review. The National Transportation Safety Board's final report was 247 pages long. The conclusion was devastating in its clarity. The collapse of the Westfield Crossing was caused by inadequate cable specifications that fell below standard safety margins for a bridge of this type and span. The design engineer, Dr. Vincent Caldwell, specified cables that, while meeting minimum theoretical requirements under ideal conditions, provided insufficient margin for real-world operating conditions, including environmental corrosion, material fatigue, and load variations. Multiple warnings about these specifications were raised by qualified engineers during the design phase and were dismissed by Dr. Caldwell. The decision to use lighter gauge cables appears to have been primarily motivated by cost considerations and a desire to maintain the project's budget competitiveness. This collapse was preventable. Standard engineering practices, if followed, would have required cable specifications that would have prevented this failure. The report didn't call it criminal negligence. It didn't need to. It laid out in excruciating detail how my decisions, my arrogance, my insistence that I knew better than everyone else had killed 17 people and destroyed countless lives. Patricia Huang testified at the investigation. I'll never forget watching her explain, with professional precision and barely contained emotion, how she had raised concerns about the cable specifications and been dismissed. How she had documented her concerns in internal memos, how she had felt increasingly worried as construction progressed, but had trusted my experience and authority. I should have pushed harder, she said, tears streaming down her face. I should have gone over his head. I knew something was wrong, but Dr. Caldwell was so confident, so certain. He had such an impressive record. I convinced myself that maybe I was being overly cautious. Kevin Park testified about running the calculations and getting results that suggested we needed more robust cables. Dr. Caldwell told me I was using overly conservative assumptions, Kevin explained. He adjusted my calculations to show that the specified cables were adequate. I was young. He was legendary in the field. I deferred to his judgment. Even James Rothman, the city inspector, testified about his concerns and how I had overwhelmed his objections with credentials, experience, and forceful certainty. I sat through every day of that investigation, watching as my entire career, my whole self-conception as a brilliant engineer, was systematically dismantled and revealed to be nothing more than dangerous arrogance built on a foundation of ego. My firm was sued by the families of the victims and by the survivors. The lawsuits were comprehensive and justified. My professional liability insurance covered some of it, but not enough. The settlements and judgments ultimately exceeded $47 million. My firm declared bankruptcy. 87 people lost their jobs. Many were talented engineers and support staff whose only mistake was working for me. My professional engineering license was permanently revoked. I was barred from ever practicing engineering again in any capacity. Criminal charges were considered, but ultimately not filed. The DA explained that while my actions constituted gross professional negligence, they didn't meet the threshold for criminal prosecution. You didn't intend to harm anyone, she told me. You just believed you were smarter than you actually were. That might have been the most devastating assessment of all. Margaret tried to support me through the investigation and the lawsuits. She really did. But there's only so much a person can carry. I don't know you anymore, she told me 6 months after the collapse. The man I married would never have dismissed legitimate safety concerns because of his ego. The man I married would never have valued his reputation over people's lives. I didn't mean for this to happen, I said. It was the only thing I could say, and it was worthless. Vincent, 17 people are dead because you were too arrogant to listen when people tried to tell you that you were wrong. Our life savings are gone because of your negligence. Your entire staff lost their jobs. And you still seem more concerned with how this has affected you than with what you did to all those families. She was right. I was still trapped in self-pity, still unconsciously viewing myself as the victim of circumstances, rather than the perpetrator of preventable catastrophe. "I want a divorce," Margaret said. "I can't carry this weight with you. I can't watch you drown in self-pity while families bury their dead." The divorce was finalized 8 months later. After 33 years of marriage, Margaret walked away with half of what little remained after the lawsuits. I didn't fight it. I deserved nothing. My sons, Daniel and Marcus, both successful professionals in their own right, struggled with what I had done. Daniel was more forgiving, or at least tried to be. "Dad, you made a terrible mistake," he told me, "but you're still my father." Marcus was less generous. "You killed people through arrogance," he said flatly. "You valued your ego over human lives. I don't know how to reconcile that with the father I thought I knew." Over time, both sons created distance, not a complete severance, but a cooling. Relationships maintained out of obligation rather than genuine connection. I couldn't blame them. My professional network evaporated. Colleagues I'd known for decades stopped returning calls. Speaking invitations disappeared. Professional organizations quietly dropped my name from their membership rolls. I sold my house, the beautiful home Margaret and I had built together, to pay legal fees and settlements. I moved to a small apartment in a city where nobody knew Dr. Vincent Caldwell. I spent my days replaying the design process, the meetings where Patricia had raised concerns, the moments where I could have made different choices. I existed in a loop of regret and self-recrimination. But beneath the guilt was something uglier, resentment. I resented Patricia for being right. I resented the investigators for exposing my failures. I resented the families who had sued me. I resented the media for turning me into a cautionary tale. I even resented the victims for dying and making me a killer. This resentment was a poison that prevented any real accountability. As long as I could find others to blame, I didn't have to fully face what I had done. For 19 years, I lived in this toxic mixture of guilt and resentment. I drank too much, I gained weight, and developed health problems. I cut off contact with most people in my life. I thought about suicide regularly, but lacked the courage to follow through. I was a ghost, a cautionary tale, a name whispered in engineering ethics courses. Remember the Caldwell Bridge collapse. 5 years ago, on that freezing February morning, I stood on the observation deck of the Riverside Bridge, seriously contemplating jumping. I had just received an email from Marcus, my younger son. He and his wife were expecting their first child. "We wanted you to know," the email said coldly, "but we've decided that you won't be part of our child's life. We can't expose them to someone who valued ego over human safety." The email broke something in me. Not because it was unfair. It wasn't, but because it crystallized what my life had become. I was a man so toxic with guilt and resentment that my own son wouldn't allow me near his child. I stood at that railing for 2 hours, looking down at the water, thinking how appropriate it would be to die the same way some of my bridge collapse victims had died. But I didn't jump, not because I found some reservoir of hope or courage, but because even suicide felt like another act of selfishness, another way of escaping accountability. Instead, I went home and did something I hadn't done in 19 years. I Googled the names of the people who died in the collapse. Sarah and Michael Chen, both 34, and their daughters, Emma and Lily, ages 6 and 4. Sarah had been a pediatrician. Michael had taught high school math. Dorothy Kensington, 67, the retired teacher. She had volunteered with adult literacy programs and had been on her way to the farmer's market when the bridge collapsed. Jennifer Okafor, 22, the nursing student. She had been 3 months away from graduating. Her family had immigrated from Nigeria. She was the first in her family to attend college. Carlos Mendoza, 28, and Rachel Thornton, 27, the engaged couple. They had planned to get married the following summer. I read about each person. Not the brief summaries in the investigation report, but real information. Their obituaries, news articles about their lives, social media tributes from friends and family. They weren't abstract victims. They were real people with families, dreams, histories, and futures I had stolen from them. I spent the entire night reading, crying, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I had done without the protective layer of resentment and self-pity. By morning, something had shifted. I still wanted to die, but I realized that dying would be the final selfish act in a life defined by selfishness. I had taken 17 lives through my arrogance. The only way to honor those deaths was to figure out how to live differently. I opened my laptop and searched, how to help after causing harm. The search led me to the Institute for Restorative Engineering, a nonprofit organization founded by engineers and family members of those killed or injured in preventable structural failures. Their mission statement hit me like a physical blow. Engineering failures are often preventable. When negligence or arrogance leads to catastrophic loss of life, those responsible must be held accountable. But accountability doesn't require the destruction of the human capacity to contribute. The Institute helps engineers who have caused harm find constructive ways to prevent future tragedies while processing guilt and moral injury. I called the number on their website. A woman named Dr. Elena Rodriguez answered. She was a civil engineer whose father had been killed in a building collapse caused by construction shortcuts. "I'm Vincent Caldwell," I said. "I designed the Westfield Crossing. 17 people died when it collapsed." There was a long pause. "I know who you are," Elena said finally. "I teach your case and engineering ethics courses. What are you looking for?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I spent 19 years wanting to die. This morning, I realized that dying would just be another selfish act, but I don't know how to live with what I've done. Would you be willing to attend one of our sessions?" Elena asked. "We have a group that meets monthly, engineers who have been involved in failures. Some caused by their negligence, some by others' negligence. All of them trying to figure out how to live with what happened." 2 weeks later, I attended my first meeting. 8 people were present, sitting in a circle in a community center conference room. Elena introduced me. "This is Vincent Caldwell, the Westfield Crossing collapse, 17 fatalities." The room was silent. Everyone knew the case. "Tell us why you're here," Elena said gently. "I'm here because I killed 17 people through arrogance," I said. "I dismissed safety concerns because I thought I knew better than everyone else. I prioritized budget and my reputation over engineering safety margins, and people died." A man across the circle spoke up. "I'm Thomas Brennan. I was the project engineer on the Riverside Plaza collapse. 12 people died when the parking structure failed. Inadequate rebar placement. I signed off on inspections I never properly conducted because I was behind schedule and under pressure." A woman next to him added, "I'm Dr. Yuki Tanaka. I approved materials for a pedestrian overpass that collapsed during an earthquake. 6 people died. The materials didn't meet seismic specifications, but I was pressured by the contractor and the deadline, and I convinced myself it would be fine." Each person shared their story. Bridges that collapsed, buildings that failed, structures that killed people due to negligence, corner cutting, arrogance, or simple human error amplified by professional responsibility. "We're not here to absolve ourselves," Elena explained. "We're here because we need to figure out how to live with what we've done, how to carry responsibility without being destroyed by it, and how to use our failures to prevent other engineers from making the same mistakes." Over the following months, I attended every session. I listened to other engineers describe their own catastrophic failures and their struggles with guilt, shame, and moral injury. Dr. Rachel Kim, a psychologist who specialized in professional trauma, attended many sessions. She explained the concept of moral injury. It's the psychological wound that comes from violating your core values and causing serious harm. For engineers whose entire professional identity is built on keeping people safe, causing deaths through negligence creates profound moral injury. "Vincent," Rachel said to me after one session, "you've spent 19 years in a toxic cycle. You feel guilty, which is appropriate, but you also feel resentful toward the investigators, the families, even the victims. That resentment prevents genuine accountability and healing." "I don't deserve healing," I said automatically. "Does your suffering bring back the 17 people who died?" Rachel asked. "Does your self-destruction prevent future engineering failures?" "No," I admitted. "Then your suffering serves no one. The families of victims don't benefit from your misery. Other engineers don't learn from your silent self-punishment. You're just existing in a state that's neither accountable nor constructive." The insight hit hard. For 19 years, I had confused suffering with accountability. I had believed that punishing myself honored the dead. But it didn't. It just meant that my catastrophic failure led to nothing but destruction. 6 months into attending the Institute sessions, Elena approached me with a proposal. "We're testifying before the State Engineering Board about proposed changes to professional oversight and peer review requirements," she said. "We want to prevent another Westfield Crossing. Would you be willing to testify about what happened and why these changes matter?" "You want me to publicly relive the worst thing I've ever done?" I asked. "I want you to use your failure to prevent other failures," Elena corrected. "Your story is powerful precisely because it's so devastating. Young engineers need to understand that arrogance kills people. Reviewing boards need to understand why peer review and safety concerns must be taken seriously." 3 weeks later, I testified before the State Engineering Board. The room was packed with engineers, regulators, and some family members of bridge collapse victims. I had prepared written remarks, but when I stood at the microphone, I abandoned them and spoke from the heart. "My name is Vincent Caldwell. 19 years ago, I designed a bridge that collapsed and killed 17 people. I killed those people, as surely as if I had pushed them into the river myself. I was a successful engineer with decades of experience. I had designed structures across the world. I was arrogant. I was certain. And when talented engineers on my own team raised legitimate safety concerns, I dismissed them because I thought I knew better. Patricia Huang, my senior engineer, told me the cable specifications were inadequate. I told her she was being overly conservative. Kevin Park, my associate engineer, ran calculations that suggested we needed bigger cables. I told him his assumptions were wrong and adjusted his calculations to support my design. The city inspector raised concerns. I overwhelmed his objections with my credentials and reputation. I didn't intend to kill anyone, but intention is irrelevant. I made decisions driven by ego and cost considerations that fell below standard safety margins, and 17 people died because I was too arrogant to listen when people tried to tell me I was wrong. I paused, looking at the faces in the audience. Some were sympathetic. Others were cold, judgmental. I deserved both responses. The regulations you're considering today? Mandatory peer review by engineers outside the project team. Stronger oversight of cost-ridden design modifications. Whistleblower protections for engineers who raise safety concerns. These would have prevented the Westfield Crossing collapse. Patricia Huang would have had a formal process to escalate her concerns beyond me. Kevin Polk's original calculations would have been reviewed by independent engineers. The inspector's concerns would have triggered additional scrutiny. You have the power to prevent other engineers from making my mistakes. You can create systems that catch arrogant engineers before their arrogance kills people. You can build safeguards that protect the public from engineers like I was. I will carry the weight of those 17 deaths for the rest of my life. I will never forgive myself, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But if my catastrophic failure leads to changes that prevent future collapses, then maybe, just maybe, there's a sliver of good that comes out of this tragedy. Then maybe something constructive can come from this tragedy. The room was silent when I finished. I sat down shaking. A woman stood up in the back. "I'm Catherine Chen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My sister Sarah and her family died on your bridge. My nieces were 6 and 4 years old." My heart stopped. I had read about Sarah Chen. I knew her story, and now her sister was standing 15 feet away from me. "I've hated you for 19 years, Catherine continued. "I've wished you were dead. I've wished you had been on that bridge when it collapsed." I nodded, unable to speak. "I wish those things too. But watching you testify today," Catherine said, "hearing you take full responsibility without making excuses, seeing you trying to prevent other families from experiencing what mine has endured, it doesn't bring my sister back. It doesn't make me forgive you. But it means something. It means Sarah's death might prevent other deaths. And that matters." She sat down. I couldn't look at her. I could barely breathe. The regulations passed 2 months later. The Caldwell Protocols, as they were informally called, though the official name was the Enhanced Engineering Safety Review Act, mandated independent peer review for all major structural projects, created formal processes for escalating safety concerns, and established stronger oversight of design modifications made for cost reasons. A year after my testimony, Elena approached me with another proposal. "We're developing a comprehensive engineering ethics curriculum for universities," she explained. "We want to include case studies presented by the engineers who were actually involved in the failures. Would you be willing to speak to engineering students about the Westfield Crossing?" "You want me to stand in front of aspiring engineers and tell them I'm a failure and a killer?" I asked. "I want you to stand in front of aspiring engineers and tell them the truth, that good engineers can make catastrophic mistakes when ego overrides professional judgment, that being brilliant doesn't mean you're infallible, that safety margins exist for good reasons." 6 weeks later, I gave my first lecture at State University's College of Engineering. 80 students filled the auditorium, along with several faculty members. I stood at the podium with a slide projected behind me, showing the Westfield Crossing before and after the collapse. The beautiful white structure in one image, the twisted wreckage in the river in the other. "My name is Dr. Vincent Caldwell," I began, or former Dr. Caldwell. "My engineering license was permanently revoked. I'm here to tell you about the worst professional failure imaginable, and what I learned too late. 19 years ago, I designed this bridge." I was considered a brilliant engineer. I had designed structures on 4 continents. I had won awards. I was confident in my abilities. I was certain I knew what I was doing. When this bridge collapsed, 17 people died. Families were destroyed. Lines were ended or permanently damaged. And it happened because I was too arrogant to listen when talented engineers tried to tell me my design was inadequate. I want to tell you their names because they weren't statistics, they were people. I went through each victim, showing their photos, sharing what I had learned about their lives. The students were silent, some visibly uncomfortable. "You're here because you want to build things," I continued. "You want to design structures that serve communities, that last for generations, that represent the best of human engineering. That's noble and important. but you need to understand your primary responsibility isn't to create beautiful structures or win awards or impress clients. Your primary responsibility is to keep people safe. And keeping people safe requires humility. It requires listening when junior engineers raise concerns. It requires peer review, even when you're certain you're right. It requires choosing safety margins over cost savings. It requires putting your ego aside and accepting that you might be wrong. I shared the specific decisions I made that led to the collapse. The cable specifications, the dismissal of concerns, the adjustments to calculations to support my predetermined conclusions. Every single one of these decisions seemed reasonable at the time, I said. I had justifications, I had experience, I had confidence, and I was catastrophically wrong. If there's one thing I want you to take from this lecture, it's this. The moment you become certain you can't be wrong is the moment you become dangerous. The best engineers are humble engineers. The safest structures are designed by people who assume they might have missed something and build in margins accordingly. A student raised her hand. Dr. Caldwell, have you found any way to forgive yourself? No, I said honestly. I don't deserve forgiveness. I killed 17 people through arrogance, but I've learned that carrying guilt doesn't require destroying your capacity to contribute. I can't bring back the people who died, but I can help prevent future failures. That's not redemption. It's just the only constructive thing I can do with the life I have left. Over the next few years, I gave that lecture at 37 universities. Each time was painful, but each time I saw students genuinely grappling with the weight of professional responsibility. Several students told me later that my lecture fundamentally changed how they approached engineering problems. One student, a young woman named Jennifer Torres, sent me an email 2 years after my lecture and working on a bridge design project. My supervisor wanted to reduce cable specifications to meet budget. I remembered your lecture and pushed back. Even though he's much more experienced, we found a different way to reduce costs without compromising safety. Thank you for being honest about your failure. 3 years into my work with the Institute, Rachel Kim, the psychologist, suggested something unexpected. Vincent, you've done important work educating engineers and advocating for safety reforms, she said. But there's something you haven't done. Directly acknowledged your harm to the families of victims. I testified publicly, I said. I've told my story hundreds of times. You've acknowledged your failure in professional contexts, Rachel clarified, but have you ever reached out directly to the families to express remorse without asking for anything in return? Without expecting forgiveness or even acknowledgement? The idea terrified me. Why would they want to hear from me? Maybe they wouldn't, Rachel admitted. Maybe they'd tell you to go to hell. But maybe some of them need to hear directly from you that you understand what you took from them, that you carry it, that you're sorry in a way that's personal rather than professional. It took me 3 months to work up the courage. With Rachel's help, I crafted letters to the families of all 17 victims. Each letter was personal, acknowledging the specific person who died and what I had learned about their life. I didn't make excuses. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I simply expressed genuine remorse and explained what I was doing to prevent future tragedies. I sent the letters expecting silence or fury. Instead, I received responses from 6 families. Catherine Chen, Sarah's sister, wrote back, "Your letter meant something. Knowing that you think about Sarah specifically, not just as one of 17 victims, matters. Knowing you're doing something constructive doesn't erase what you did, but it's better than if you had just disappeared into self-pity." Dorothy Kensington's son wrote, "My mother was an educator her entire life. She believed people could learn and grow from their mistakes. I think she would appreciate that you're using your failure to teach others. It doesn't bring her back, but it means her death wasn't completely meaningless." Not all responses were kind, 2 families sent angry, painful replies, making clear that no amount of teaching or advocacy would ever be sufficient. One family's letter simply said, "Don't contact us again. You destroyed our lives, and nothing you do will ever change that." I deserved all of it, the acknowledgement and the fury. 4 years into my work with the Institute, something unexpected happened. Patricia Huang contacted me. "Vincent, I've been following your advocacy work," her email said. "I'd like to meet with you." We met at a coffee shop in the city where we had worked together decades earlier. Patricia was now in her late 60s, still working as a consulting engineer. "I wanted to hate you," Patricia said after we sat down. "For years, I did hate you. You dismissed my concerns, and people died because of it. But I also blamed myself. I should have pushed harder. I should have gone over your head." "Patricia, you did everything you could," I said. "I was your supervisor. You raised concerns multiple times. What happened was my failure, not yours." "Intellectually, I know that," she said. "But emotionally, I've carried guilt too. I watched you dismiss legitimate safety concerns, and I wasn't forceful enough to stop you." We talked for 3 hours. About the design process, about the concerns she raised, about the collapse, about the aftermath. "Watching you testify at the engineering board hearing," Patricia said, "seeing you take full responsibility without making excuses, without trying to spread blame, it helped me let go of some of my own guilt. You owned what you did. That allowed me to accept that I genuinely did what I could." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so deeply sorry that I put you in that position, that I dismissed your professional judgment, that I made you doubt yourself." "I accept your apology," Patricia said, "and I want you to know something else. The Caldwell protocols, the peer review requirements, the whistleblower protections, they're making a difference. I've seen situations where engineers were able to escalate safety concerns and prevent potential failures. Your advocacy work matters." We stayed in contact after that. Patricia became an advocate for the Institute's work, speaking alongside me at several conferences. 5 years into my work with the Institute, I received an unexpected email from Marcus, my younger son. "Dad, I've been following your advocacy work. Rachel and I have been talking. We'd like you to meet your grandson. His name is Vincent, named after you." I read the email 3 times, unable to believe it. We met at a park. Marcus and Rachel were there with a 3-year-old boy with dark curly hair and my late father's eyes. "This is your grandfather," Marcus told little Vincent. I knelt down to the boy's level, tears streaming down my face. "Hello, Vincent." "Why are you crying?" the boy asked with the blunt curiosity of young childhood. "Because I'm very happy to meet you," I said. After Vincent ran off to play, Marcus explained, "I've spent years angry at you, ashamed of you. I told myself I'd never let you near my family. But Rachel helped me see that I was punishing you for being human, for making catastrophic mistakes, and then doing everything in your power to prevent others from making the same mistakes. Marcus, I understand if you want to protect your son from me," I said. "What I did was unforgivable. You made terrible decisions that cost people their lives." Marcus agreed. "But you spent the last 5 years taking full responsibility and doing meaningful work to prevent future tragedies. My son should know his grandfather. He should know that people can fail catastrophically and still find ways to contribute positively." Our relationship didn't magically repair itself, but it began healing. We started having monthly dinners. Marcus asked me about my work with the Institute. I got to watch little Vincent grow. Daniel, my older son, took longer. But 2 years after Marcus's reconciliation, he reached out too. "Dad, I teach project management now. I've been using your case as an example of how organizational culture and leadership affect safety outcomes. I'd like you to guest lecture in my class." Standing in front of Daniel's students, with my son introducing me, felt like a form of redemption I had never imagined possible. Not absolution. I would never be absolved, but acknowledgement that my life still held value despite my catastrophic failure. 6 years into my work with the Institute, Elena approached me with an unusual proposal. The city is building a memorial at the site of the Westfield Crossing, she explained. They've asked if you would be willing to participate in the dedication ceremony, to speak about the victims. My first instinct was to refuse. Who was I to speak at a memorial for people I had killed? But Elena pressed me. Vincent, the families were consulted. Some wanted nothing to do with you, but others, including Chen, specifically requested that you be part of the ceremony. They feel your presence acknowledges the full truth, that these deaths were preventable, that they resulted from human failure, and that something constructive has come from the tragedy. The memorial was a contemplative space along the riverbank. 17 stone pillars arranged in a circle, each engraved with a victim's name, age, and a brief description of who they were. In the center was a reflecting pool with an inscription. In memory of those lost to preventable tragedy, may their deaths inspire vigilance, humility, and care. The dedication ceremony was held on a bright October afternoon, 19 years after the collapse. Hundreds of people attended, family members, survivors, city officials, engineers, and community members. I stood to the side during most of the ceremony, feeling like an intruder at a funeral I had caused. Several speakers shared memories of the victims. Chen spoke about her sisters, Sarah, and her nieces, Emma and Lily, their laughter, their dreams, their love of life. Then Elena introduced me. Vincent Caldwell designed the bridge that collapsed. What happened next could have been a story of denial, deflection, and moral cowardice. Instead, it became a story of accountability, education, and prevention. Mr. Caldwell will share some reflections. I walked to the podium, my hands shaking. I looked at the 17 pillars, each representing a life I had stolen. My name is Vincent Caldwell, I began. I designed the bridge that collapsed on this site 19 years ago. I stand before you as the person responsible for 17 deaths. I want to speak about each person we're honoring today, not as abstract victims, but as human beings whose lives had meaning and value. I went through each name, sharing what I had learned about them over the years. Sarah Chen, the pediatrician who treated low-income children for free. Michael Chen, the math teacher who started a tutoring program for struggling students. Dorothy Kensington, who taught adults to read. Jennifer Okafor, who dreamed of becoming a nurse practitioner in underserved communities. These weren't just good people, I said. They were people actively making the world better, and I took that from the world through my arrogance, my certainty, my refusal to listen when qualified engineers told me my design was inadequate. For years, I believed suffering was my obligation, that punishing myself honored these 17 lives. But I was wrong. My suffering did nothing for the families who lost loved ones. My isolation and self-destruction didn't prevent a single future engineering failure. What has mattered, what these families have told me matters, is the work that came from this tragedy. The engineering safety protocols that bear my name, though I take no pride in that. The hundreds of engineering students who have heard the truth about what arrogance costs. The peer review systems that have prevented other potential failures. I will never forgive myself. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I've learned that I can carry the weight of what I did while also doing work that prevents other families from experiencing this loss. If you take anything from this memorial, let it be this: safety margins exist for reasons. Peer review is essential. Humility is a professional virtue. And when someone raises concerns, listen. Listen, because 17 people died because I didn't. After the ceremony, several family members approached me, some to shake my hand, some simply to acknowledge my presence, two to tell me with quiet fury that nothing I did would ever be enough. Chen hugged me. Sarah would have appreciated what you're doing, she said. She believed people could change, could learn, could become better. You've done that. It doesn't bring her back, but it means something. 7 years into my work with the Institute, Rachel Kim approached me about co-authoring a book about moral injury in professional contexts. Your story resonates beyond engineering, Rachel explained. Doctors who make fatal mistakes, pilots involved in crashes, military personnel who make decisions that cost lives. Anyone whose professional failure results in catastrophic harm experiences moral injury. Your journey from self-destruction to accountability to contribution could help others. The book, titled The Weight of Competence: Living with Professional Failure, took 2 years to write. It was excruciating, requiring me to examine every aspect of my failure, my psychology, my recovery process. We included sections from other professionals. A surgeon whose mistake during an operation killed a patient. A pilot whose decision-making error caused a crash. A police officer whose split-second judgment resulted in an innocent person's death. The common thread was the struggle to reconcile professional identity with catastrophic failure, to accept accountability without accepting worthlessness, to find ways to contribute meaningfully despite having caused irreversible harm. The book found an unexpected audience, not just professionals who had caused harm, but anyone struggling with guilt, failure, and the question of whether life could have meaning after devastating mistakes. I received hundreds of letters from readers. A doctor wrote, "I killed a patient through a medication error 5 years ago. I've been contemplating suicide ever since. Your book helped me understand that my death wouldn't benefit anyone, but my experience could prevent other medical errors." A former military officer wrote, "I made a tactical decision that got members of my unit killed. I've been drinking myself to death ever since." Your work showed me there might be another path. 8 years into my work with the Institute, Elena proposed expanding our mission. "We're establishing the Institute's legacy project," she explained, "a comprehensive database of structural failures, including detailed analysis of what went wrong and how similar failures can be prevented. We want you to lead the project." The legacy project became my primary work for the next 3 years. We documented hundreds of structural failures: bridges, buildings, dams, tunnels. For each failure, we analyzed the engineering decisions, organizational culture, warning signs that were missed or dismissed, and lessons learned. The database became a required resource in engineering programs worldwide. Students could search by failure type, see the actual engineering calculations, read testimonies from engineers involved, and understand how failures progressed from small decisions to catastrophic outcomes. My section on the Westfield Crossing was the most comprehensive. I included everything: my original calculations, Patricia's concerns, Kevin's revised calculations, the investigation report, testimony transcripts, photographs of the collapse, and most importantly, detailed information about each victim. "Engineers need to understand what's at stake," I wrote in the introduction. "These aren't abstract calculations. These are decisions about human lives. Every safety margin you cut, every concern you dismiss, every time you let ego override judgment, you risk becoming me, a brilliant engineer who killed people through arrogance." 9 years into my recovery, I received an unexpected email from Margaret, my ex-wife. "Vincent, I've been following your work. Would you be willing to meet for coffee?" We met at a cafe in the city where we had once lived together. Margaret was 70 now, her hair gray, her face lined with age and experience. She was still beautiful. "I've watched what you've done over the past decade," Margaret said after we ordered. "The testimony, the teaching, the advocacy work. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you." The words hit me unexpectedly hard. "Margaret, I don't deserve—" "Stop," she interrupted. "You've spent years accepting that you don't deserve forgiveness or peace or happiness. And maybe you don't, but you do deserve acknowledgement that you've done something meaningful with your failure. When I divorced you, you were drowning in self-pity. You were so focused on your own pain that you couldn't see the destruction you'd caused. You were still making it about you, your ruined career, your lost reputation, your suffering. But you changed. You took genuine accountability. You stopped deflecting. You found a way to use your catastrophic failure to prevent future failures. That's not redemption, Vincent. But it's something. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you need to hear it from someone who knew you before, Margaret said. Someone who saw you at your worst and left because of it. You're not the man you were. You're better. Not good enough to undo what you did, but better than you were. We talked for 3 hours, catching up on decades of separate lives. Margaret had remarried, a kind man named Robert, who treated her well. She was happy. I don't want to get back together, Margaret clarified. That ship sailed long ago, but I wanted you to know that I no longer wish you were dead. I want you to keep doing the work you're doing. 10 years into my work with the Institute, I received an email that changed everything. The subject line was, "I'm about to make your mistake." The sender was a young engineer named David Park. The name caught my attention immediately, Kevin Park's son. David's email explained that he was the lead engineer on a bridge project. My supervisor is pushing me to reduce cable specifications to meet budget constraints. I've raised concerns 3 times. He keeps dismissing me, telling me I'm being overly conservative. He says his experience means he knows better. Mr. Caldwell, I'm watching him do exactly what you did to my father, and I don't know how to stop him without destroying my career. I'm reaching out because I don't know what else to do. I called David immediately. "Mr. Caldwell?" he answered, his voice shaking. "David, tell me everything," I said. He explained the project, the concerns he'd raised, the pressure he was facing to approve inadequate specifications. "You know what you need to do?" I told him. "You need to go over his head. You need to document everything and escalate to the engineering board. You need to refuse to sign off on those specifications, even if it costs you your job." "My career will be over," David said. "My supervisor is well connected. He'll blacklist me." "Your career will be over if you approve those specifications and the bridge fails," I countered. "You'll become me. You'll spend the rest of your life knowing you let people die because you were afraid of professional consequences." "David, I'm going to say something harsh. I don't care about your career. I care about the people who will use that bridge. They deserve an engineer who will put their safety above his professional advancement." There was a long silence. "You're right," David said finally. "I know you're right. Document everything," I instructed. "Every concern you've raised, every dismissal from your supervisor. Then take it to the state engineering board. I'll support you. I'll testify if needed. You will not face this alone." David escalated his concerns. His supervisor was furious and did try to damage David's reputation. But the engineering board investigated, brought in independent reviewers, and found that David's concerns were valid. The cable specifications were inadequate. The project was redesigned with proper safety margins. David's supervisor was reprimanded and required to complete additional ethics training. David faced professional consequences. He was let go from his firm, but the Institute hired him immediately. "You saved lives," I told David at his first Institute meeting. "You did what I failed to do, put safety above ego. You're the engineer I should have been. I could only do it because you taught me what happens when engineers fail to do it," David replied. Now, 15 years after that February morning when I stood on a bridge contemplating suicide, I find myself living a life I never could have imagined. I'm 71 years old. I coordinate the Institute for Restorative Engineering's Legacy Project, documenting structural failures to prevent future tragedies. I speak regularly at engineering schools, professional conferences, and ethics seminars. The work I helped establish has expanded to 28 countries. The Caldwell protocols, the engineering safety reforms that emerged from my catastrophic failure, have been adopted in 43 states and 17 countries. Independent analysis suggests they've prevented at least 6 major structural failures that would have resulted in significant loss of life. My relationship with my sons has healed in ways I never thought possible. Marcus and his family are regular parts of my life. Little Vincent, now 8, is fascinated by bridges and engineering. Daniel and I collaborate on professional ethics projects. Margaret and I maintain a cordial friendship. She and Robert attend my speaking engagements occasionally. Seeing her in the audience, seeing her proud of who I've become, means more than I can express. I maintain relationships with several families of Westfield Crossing victims. Not all. Some want nothing to do with me, and I respect that absolutely. But Chen and I have become something like friends. She speaks at institute events about what families need from engineers who have caused harm. Genuine accountability, not defensiveness. Action, not excuses. Humility, not ego. Most importantly, I wake up each morning with purpose. The guilt about the 17 deaths remains. It will never leave, but it no longer paralyzes me. Instead, it motivates me to do everything possible to prevent other engineers from making my mistakes. Last month, I received a letter that crystallized everything I've been working toward for 15 years. The letter was from a structural engineer named Maria Santos. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Caldwell, 10 years ago, I attended your lecture at State University. I was a junior engineering student, confident in my abilities, certain I would be a brilliant engineer. Your lecture terrified me, not because of the collapse or the deaths, but because I recognized myself in your description of young Vincent Caldwell. I was arrogant. I was certain. I dismissed professors who challenged my designs. I thought humility was for lesser engineers. Your story changed how I approached engineering. I became obsessed with peer review, with checking and rechecking calculations, with genuinely listening when others raised concerns. 5 years ago, I was the lead engineer on a pedestrian bridge project. During final design review, a junior engineer on my team raised concerns about wind load calculations. My initial instinct was to dismiss him. I had double-checked those calculations myself, and they were fine. But I remembered your lecture. I remembered you saying that the moment you become certain you can't be wrong is the moment you become dangerous. So I listened. I brought in an independent reviewer, and they found an error in my calculations. Not a massive error, but significant enough that under specific wind conditions, the bridge could have experienced dangerous oscillations. We redesigned. The bridge opened 6 months late and over budget. My firm lost money on the project, but the bridge is safe, and I didn't become you. Mr. Caldwell, I'm writing to tell you that your catastrophic failure saved lives, not just through the Caldwell protocols, but through every engineer who heard your story and chose humility over certainty. There's a bridge in San Diego that carries thousands of people safely every day. Those people don't know that your failure is why that bridge is safe. But I know, and I wanted you to know. Your story matters. Your accountability matters. Your work matters. With profound respect, Maria Santos, P.E. I keep Maria's letter on my desk alongside photos and letters from others whose lives have been touched by the work that emerged from my catastrophic failure. If I could share one message from my journey, it would be this: the worst moments of our lives don't have to define our entire existence. We can carry terrible guilt, can acknowledge catastrophic failures, can accept that we've caused irreversible harm, and still build lives of meaning and purpose. Redemption isn't about erasing what we've done. It's not about earning forgiveness or achieving some state where our failures no longer matter. Redemption is about doing what we can with the life we have left, about using our painful experiences to benefit others, about ensuring that our worst moments lead to something beyond pure destruction. You cannot undo the past. You cannot bring back what was lost. You cannot earn absolution for the unforgivable. But you can wake up each morning and choose to do something constructive with your guilt. You can channel your pain into prevention. You can transform your failures into wisdom that protects others. A weight doesn't disappear. You learn to carry it. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, you discover that the weight you're carrying can become ballast that steadies you, grounds you in purpose, connects you to others who need what you've learned through suffering. 17 people died because of my arrogance. Sarah and Michael Chen and their daughters Emma and Lily, Dorothy Kensington, Jennifer Okafor, Carlos Mendoza, and Rachel Thornton, and 10 others whose names I speak every single day. They would all be alive if I had been humble enough to listen when talented engineers told me I was wrong. They would be living their lives, loving their families, contributing to their communities. Nothing I do will bring them back. Nothing I do will make their deaths acceptable or justified or redemptive in any cosmic sense. But the work exists. The Caldwell protocols exist. The thousands of engineering students who have heard the truth about what arrogance costs exist. The bridges that were redesigned because engineers remembered my story exist. The engineers like Maria Santos who chose humility over certainty exist. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. And sometimes, when guilt threatens to drown me the way water drowned some of my victims, I remember that something is infinitely better than nothing, that purpose is infinitely better than despair, that carrying this weight while moving forward is infinitely better than carrying it while standing still. The bridge that collapsed taught me about structural failure, but it also taught me about reconstruction, about building something meaningful for rubble, about engineering a life that serves others even after catastrophic collapse. We are all carrying weight, the weight of our failures, our regrets, our moments when we were certain and wrong. My hope is that by sharing my story, by doing this work, by transforming my catastrophic failure into something that protects others, I can help others learn to carry their weight constructively. Keep listening. Keep questioning your certainty. Keep building safety margins. Keep choosing humility over ego. The weight you carry might become the foundation for preventing someone else's catastrophe. And remember, it's never too late to transform your worst failure into your most meaningful work. Lives shaped by tragedy can still contribute safety, wisdom, and the hard-earned knowledge that arrogance kills, but humility saves. Thank you for taking the time to read Vincent's story. This narrative explores difficult themes: professional responsibility, catastrophic failure, moral injury, and the possibility of finding purpose after causing irreversible harm through negligence. This story asks, can someone who caused deaths through arrogance find redemption? What does accountability look like when the harm cannot be undone? How do we balance genuine remorse with the need to continue living? Is professional brilliance compatible with catastrophic moral failure? These questions have no simple answers, and the story doesn't provide them. Vincent never fully forgives himself. Some families never forgive him. The 17 people remain dead. But something constructive emerges from the tragedy. Not enough to justify it, but enough to give Vincent's continued existence some purpose. Whether this narrative succeeds in portraying realistic accountability or inappropriate redemption for unforgivable harm is for you to decide.